Okay, let's get started. I'm trying to sweat.
Hold on.
Silence your phone.
Amateur hour.
Just messy. Welcome to Foursquare, the digital video show you can only find right here on Politico. I'm Eugene Daniels, and joining me virtually are my very smart and wonderful colleagues, Laura Barrón-López, a national political reporter, Tim Alberta, chief political correspondent for Politico magazine, and Ryan Lizza, he is our chief Washington correspondent at Politico. Hi, guys.
Hey, Eugene.
Hey, Eugene.
With Foursquare, we are going to dig into some of the biggest, the messiest, and the most complicated topics that are taking over the political and policy world. First up this week, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed so many different things about American life, but one that may have the most lasting impact is this kind of two sides of America being impacted by the coronavirus in different ways. Look at this chart really quickly. Overall, we're seeing counties that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, aka blue counties, getting hit much harder than the ones President Trump won. A lot of those blue areas are more urban, they're stacked on top of each other, and it's creating those two realities where the left is experiencing this crisis one way and the right in a completely different way. Laura, what does that kind of mean for how the impact of the pandemic will have on the election?
The people that support President Trump, the voters that support President Trump, we've seen that in those counties have been more eager to reopen. Across the board, people are being hit in their pocketbooks. But because the impact of the virus, the infections, the hospitalizations, the deaths haven't been felt as much in counties that are supportive of Trump, they are much more eager to reopen and get back to life as usual. But with that also comes risks. And so it'd be interesting to see whether or not these reopenings, if they are happening too soon, and warnings from public health officials aren't being heeded, if eventually we can see second waves occur in these areas.
Yeah, you know, Dave Wasserman over at the Cook Political Report has this awesome technique where he breaks down after every presidential election the Whole Foods counties and the Cracker Barrel counties, depending on how the presidential candidates do, tracks really closely with that. And it's not coincidental. I mean, when you look at those Whole Foods counties and the population density and where the sort of demographic and socioeconomic trend lines are in those places, it makes all the sense in the world that A, they would be hardest hit, and that B, to Laura's point, they would be the most hesitant to want to reopen, whether you're talking about businesses or churches or Little League baseball games or anything. And then conversely, obviously, in those Cracker Barrel counties that haven't been hit the hardest yet, yeah, of course they want to reopen. They want to go back to church. They want to get their small businesses up and running. Not only is it part of their sort of cultural DNA, but from a public health perspective, they just haven't felt it nearly in the way that these other folks have in these blue counties, these Whole Food counties.
And to me, this is one of the most troublesome parts of the whole coronavirus pandemic, because I mean, what are the chances that, a virus, a national pandemic, happened to map with our, tribal divide? Right. And, President Trump spends a lot of time thinking about his voters, his half of the country, unusual for a president, unlike any other president before him in the way that he thinks of governing just these people. And, I think it clearly plays into his policy response when he has that kind of information about who is being hit the worst.
I think we also can't forget that, in those counties, the vast majority of those counties, yes, they're blue counties, but they also are very diverse. And so we know that disproportionately African Americans and Latinos are being infected, hospitalized, and dying from this. And we've seen thorough reporting from Politico as well as other outlets about what that means and how that also plays into the racial tensions that are very existent right now in America. And then the other thing is that I find it striking that in any other instance where 100,000 Americans have died, we would have felt, I think, more of a unifying or rallying as a country that hasn't entirely existed in this moment. It hasn't really been present. And you could potentially argue that, yes, as Ryan said, that's because the administration still very much stokes divisions heading into the election.
You know, and I think that's true, Laura, but at the same time, I mean, this is post 9/11 America, right? I mean, whether it's Barack Obama or whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's whoever comes next, there's no going back. And I hate to be the cynic in the group. I don't enjoy bringing these grim tidings, but this is the country we live in now. And you know, when Barack Obama so famously talked about there being no red America, no blue America, we are just the United States of America, it was an incredibly powerful line, but it was also just untrue. There is a red America, there is a blue America, and as we've seen with one cultural brush fire after another over the last decade or so, these fault lines are exposed by events like the coronavirus. This is a bitterly divided, fragmented country that we live in. And anytime we begin to kid ourselves about that, we are reminded by an event like this that just reinforces how stark those divides really are.
That is going to keep playing out, and we'll obviously keep talking about that as we get closer to the election. Everyone's talking about who Vice President Joe Biden is going to pick for his veep. So I am going to force you to pick a person. You have 20 seconds, and why that person and how they're going to help Vice President Joe Biden win in 2020. Tim, you go first.
This is one of those questions that's just so easy. There's no other answer to it. It's Kamala Harris. There are two demographics that matter in this election that where Hillary Clinton really struggled in 2016. African Americans and suburban women. Kamala Harris helps with both. It's a no-brainer.
Laura?
I'm hearing a bit more, even from House Democrats, this warmness toward Elizabeth Warren, which I know seems strange given the way the primary played out. You know, I think that it could maybe be an outlandish pick, one that no one really expects in Warren, but he also does need to bring along a lot of young voters, and young voters go more for her than I think a vast majority of the other people being considered.
Basically, the way voters view this is through the prism of the person at the top. They don't really think much about the person on the bottom, but they think, did this person make a good decision? That for that reason, and then just because she'll have the least number of people against her, I think Kamala Harris is the most likely.
Here's my big question. This is a kind of a theory that I have. And Ryan, you kind of alluded to this. Does it actually matter who he picks? Part of his appeal is that he can get the Midwest back. He clearly already has the support of older Black voters. They're the base of the Democratic Party. What else does he need? Like, what else? Like, what does it matter? Could he just pick whoever the hell he wants and it won't actually have any impact? Tim, I'll go to you since I made you pick first.
Ryan's point is the salient one here about doing no harm. We saw that John McCain in 2008 actively did harm to the ticket by selecting Sarah Palin. The initial 3-week boost notwithstanding, it just wound up not only because of her sort of wacky comments made in isolation, but because overall the perception of her actually was contradictory to the image that John McCain had spent decades cultivating. Occasionally, you do have an instance where somebody is not a known commodity. The voters in their own party maybe are skeptical of them, and they need to build in some reassurance. So we saw that in a big way in 2016 with Donald Trump selecting Mike Pence. That was his way of soothing the Republican base, the conservative evangelical wing of the party in particular. It was Mike Pence and the Supreme Court list. He said, look, I'm going to do these two things to show you guys that you have nothing to worry about. Joe Biden's problems with the far left of the Democratic Party are not quite as pronounced, but they exist. And for the Elizabeth Warren crowd and certainly the Bernie Sanders crowd, I don't think that it could hurt for Joe Biden to signal that he really is interested in governing toward their agenda.
I mean, I agree with, both of them, with Tim and Ryan, which is that at the end of the day, is this going to change a voter's vote? Is this going to change whether or not they vote for Biden? No. But the thing that Biden is doing, or can do, as Tim suggested, is at the same time that he maybe rolls out his VP pick, he also strongly suggests, shadow cabinet posts or who he may put in his cabinet, which is something that I hear a lot from lawmakers on the Hill, especially Black lawmakers and Hispanic lawmakers, which is, a decent amount of them actually are saying they don't want to box Biden in. They aren't going to say out loud that they want him to pick a Latina or a Black woman, because what they're more concerned about at the end of the day is that who he puts in his administration is reflective of the country and that they have a voice at the table in terms of crafting that policy. And
look, one way, obviously, this is the most consequential pick in recent history is because Biden is 77 years old. So by far, the thing that he needs to do more than anything else is pick someone that everyone agrees, or that voters agree can be president, because let's be honest, the chances of that person being president are high.
Thank you guys for joining. We'll see you next time. Different topics, the same group in 4 squares.